Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our lab session on creating awesome charts. My name is Chandoo, and I will be helping you create better charts for the next 2 hours. Of course, you can create better charts even after that, but what we have is a very short presentation. Hopefully, this should take 20 minutes, maybe less or more, depending on what kind of questions you are asking. And then we will jump into Excel. I know some people do not have computers, but the computers that we have provided, they are loaded with Excel 2013, and we will use that for demonstrating and learning some charting ideas and concepts. Let me, before we jump into the presentation, just let me share you a couple of key rules. Please ask me a lot of questions at any point if you feel confused or you are struggling with a certain example that we are trying to build, or you don't even understand what it is. Just ask me a question. We have a couple of people who here to help you in case you are struggling with the computer or you are not able to hear or see anything. I assume the screen is replicated on all the computers, so you can also see that, and you will receive a copy of this presentation in case you already don't have it. So, you do not have to take a lot of notes, just pay attention and try to understand things. Now, first I just want to say that it feels a little frightening to be in a big room like this. When I usually do a class, it's the maximum I have had is like 25 people. Of course, there was a time when 80 people were there, but that is all of them in the same company. So, it is a different thing. So, it feels little weird to see so many people and try to help all of them, but sometimes I may not see that you are struggling or you are not understanding. So, in case I do not notice you, just shout so that I can help you. Let us start this, and please keep your mobile phones in silent mode. And so, what we have here is a very brief agenda for this presentation. Why is it important to select right type of charts for your data? What kind of a process you should follow? And what to do when you want to make a very complex type of chart, and some Q&As in case you have any comments or suggestions based on what you are seeing here. Okay. Before we talk about the very first item, as you can see, what happens for the next 2 hours is we will first understand how to go from a raw data to selection of the chart. That is the very first problem we need to address. So, that problem is addressed by the principles and guidelines mentioned in this presentation. And then we will go and create some types of charts that are not usually found in the insert chart menu or ribbon of Excel. Okay. You have seen the agenda. In case if you feel that we should talk about any other topic, please feel free to speak. Although this is for 2 hours, I hope we can cover everything that I set out to in the 90 minutes. So, we have some time to take up some questions and maybe build some additional types of charts or discuss certain items. Okay. So, here is one example where charts are used. Of course, charts are used for many reasons, but in a typical business settings, we use charts so that we can either make decisions or understand what is going on and get a feel of things. Okay. So, here is a chart that somebody prepared so that a hiring manager can make a decision. So, what happened is we interviewed 3 different people and we rated them on 6 types of skills. Okay. And someone prepared this kind of chart and they sent it to us. So, all of us in this room, let us imagine that we are the hiring managers and we are looking at this chart and we are trying to figure out who should be hired. So, can anyone tell me which person we should hire? Karen, Jack, anybody for Mike? You want to hire Karen? Good. Depends on the job. Any other suggestions? You all make poor hiring managers. Come on. Maybe what we can do is easier than hiring 3 of them is we can fire the person who made this chart. It seems they made this chart so that we can hire somebody. We, as in whoever is going to look at this chart. But we are looking at this and we are scratching our head and we are wondering what this chart is telling us. This is what happens when you make a wrong type of chart. you are trying to communicate, you are trying to tell a story, you are trying to help your boss or colleague or clients make a decision, but they are not doing it because the chart selection is wrong. If you were to present the same data in a different way, like a table for example, maybe the hiring decision can be simplified. If you look at the chart and the alternative representation, we can call the table as a chart as well. It's the same thing. Both of them are telling the same numbers, but now you can look at these numbers and you can start interpreting them better. If the job requires all round performance, we can hire Karen because she has good ratings across all the skills. Or you can even get into some sort of a what if kind of analysis. Maybe this job is a marketing job, you need to do a lot of communication, you need to have good interpersonal skills, so we could hire Jack because he scores high on those things. Or it's a back office job and we can hire Mike because he has good knowledge and education. So these kind of things can only be decided or understood when the information is presented in the right medium. So this is one example where poor chart selection can lead to lot of confusion and delay in decisions. Here is another chart. Some charts are like they are not meant to be made. Here is one chart. This is actually something that I have seen in a newspaper in India. So you might notice the car names, but car makers, they have brands all over the world. The same makers are there. So Hyundai, which is one of the leading car manufacturers in the world, they published this particular advertisements in an Indian newspaper a while ago. What they are claiming is they are saying Purna, which is one of their sedans, is the best car out there because it is selling 50,000 units of the car. But you look at the chart, it is basically a 3D pie chart that they have created to show and make an impression that we are such a big player in the market. What kind of an impression you get when you look at this chart? Obviously, you see a lot of yellow, so we feel that this must be at least 40% of the market, and you feel everybody else is so small, right? That's the kind of impression this chart is creating. But is that true? Is that the real picture? Well, what happens is you can create a chart and you can convey others that one thing is better than other. That's what is happening here. So what I did is I created the same chart in Excel. Of course, probably they use it Photoshop or something, so it looks more glossy, but it's the same chart. And see what happens if you rotate this chart, suddenly the impression changes. I can create any type of impression. For example, I rotate this, so now Vento is the best selling car or the City is the best selling car. Same numbers, but so each car company can come up with their own ads with the same set of data. Okay. So this is really what happens when you use wrong type of charts or charts that can disguise data instead of telling the full picture. Okay. So this is why we should go with right type of charts, so they don't hide data and they communicate clearly and better all the time. So now that we have seen some bad examples, probably if they presented the same chart like this, it's the same numbers. Now there is no doubt this car is the best car, but it is not hiding the rest of the other cars. It's not making other achievements insignificant. Instead, it is presenting the data for what it is and making you and me understand it better. So now that we understood the couple of bad charts and what happens when you prepare wrong type of charts, let's go ahead and understand the process for creating right type of charts. How do you make good charts? What is the process behind it? Well, turns out the process is pretty much common sense. Okay, so there are 4 steps. We need to identify what we want to convey with that chart. What should be the message for this chart? What kind of intention this chart has, and then we'll go into each of those steps. So when you want to identify the message, obviously the easiest way to find the message of the chart is you can ask yourself. You are the analyst, you are sitting in the room with some data, so you can ask yourself, hey, what kind of a story do I want to communicate? So it's like you most of the time know what is it that you want to communicate, so then you will go and make the chart for it. but as happens with many business situations, we do not know what we want to communicate. We just have 1,000 rows of data and we are looking at it and we are wondering what stories are buried in it. Okay. So, in such situations you can go with one of the common messages in many business communications. There are usually business communication involves one of the 6 messages that are shown here. It could be one of the 6 or it could be a combination of 6. So, let us go and talk about each of those 6 messages. Sometimes you want to bring out the message of comparison, like the car manufacturing advertisement we saw. They want to compare themselves with rest of the cars and tell us the story that we are way better than the competition. So, that is the kind of comparison picture that you want to communicate. Sometimes you want to explain the distribution. For example, you work in a government office and you wanted to understand, let us say you are the mayor of San Francisco. So, you wanted to understand for certain policy decisions, like you want to offer free meals to certain group of people in the population. So, now you go ahead and ask yourself what is the distribution of people like and how many people would be there in this group where I want to offer free meals or free books or free iPads or things like that. So, to make the decision, sometimes you want to know what is the distribution of things, what is the distribution of data looking like. This is more relevant for us in a day-to-day scenarios, like you want to buy a house, you go and look at the housing websites. They will tell you in a certain neighborhood, this is the distribution of house. The minimum priced house is $200,000, the maximum priced house is $2 million, and the median is like this. So, those are the kind of distribution messages conveyed in such scenarios. Sometimes you want to tell how one part relates to all other parts as a whole. This is the classic pie charts that we often see. Pie chart says this is the 100% picture and this particular pie is 75%. So, parts to whole is another common message that we want to communicate in a business setting. Often we are looking for some trends. You want to understand how things have changed over a period of time, like how a value of a particular company's stock has changed over the last 12 months, or how your company sales have been going up or going down in the last 3 years. Those kind of messages we want to convey. Often we are looking for deviation. What is that one or few elements that deviate from rest of the pack and why they are different? For example, in a school classroom, you might be looking for deviation in terms of who is the top performer and who are the people who are lagging, because you want to pay special attention to those two groups of people, mentor the people who are lagging behind everybody and understand why a certain person or a group of people are doing way better, and maybe take those lessons and apply for the rest. Likewise, often you are also looking for relationships. Is there a relationship between a certain item and some other item in the data? For example, are we selling more ice creams as the temperature rises up? These are the kind of relationship messages that you want to explore and present in a chart. So, when you want to create a chart, the very first step would be to pick one of those 6 messages. You can also pick a combination of messages. You could say, I want to explore trend over time with a focus on deviation, or I want to understand parts to whole, but compare one part with another. So, we can pick one of the 6 messages or a combination of those 6. So, this is how you would start when you are given a data set and you are asked to go and analyze it. Your first task would be to figure out what are the messages that you are trying to communicate from that data and why those messages are important for a particular type of like a CEO might be interested in trends and comparisons and things like that. So, you based on the audience and based on the situation, you will go and find those messages that would be interesting for you to work with. Any questions at this point? Okay, I will move on. Once you pick the messages, you will go and rearrange the data, because the data often may not be in the same shape as the messages that you want to convey. Okay. This would be, for example, for a certain message you wanted to make certain type of chart. We do not know what charts to make yet, but let us imagine for that kind of a message to be conveyed, like the relationship message, you need to either remove all other data and keep only those 2 columns or any of those kind of things. This is where rearranging comes. to rearrange, you can use Excel formulas, tools like Power Query. Those tools you can use pivot tables, you can use Power Pivot, or you can use some of the commercial add-ins, etc. After using these tools, you can reshape the data so that it will be in the shape where you can now go and insert the chart from that shape, and the chart will come up. But what charts? This is where we will prepare the chart, but what charts? Again, Excel has many types of charts. When you go to insert chart area of Excel, you would see that there are probably 8 or 9 different types of chart. Purely from a business communication point of view, I would recommend that you stick to one of these 6 charts as much as possible. Okay. So, about 85 to 90% of the time, if you make only one of these 6 type of charts or a combination of these 6, you are good, because what happens with these 6 charts is that they are very easy to understand. People have been seeing them for hundreds of years, so you do not have to explain to your boss or clients what these charts mean, how to read them, how to interpret the results, and they save you time, right? You will click insert and then they are done. Just so you know what these are: column, bar, line, XY plot, pie chart, and the last one is just giving the data as a table. Just give the raw data as is in the naked form, so that people can read the numbers, they can make their own interpretations based on what they want to look for. So, now we have 6 messages and 6 charts. The next step would be connecting these two. For which message, what chart we should prepare? Simple mapping. So, when you want to compare, you can use any one of these 6. All the 6 would work really well for comparison. When you are talking about the story of distribution, you can use the column charts or the line charts or the XY plot. Usually distribution is an area where we associate it with one of the, I am going to write something here, hopefully everyone can see it. But distribution is something that we learned back in school, like a bell curve distribution, normal distribution. These are the kind of things, and these are easily understood when you plot it as a line or some columns. Okay. But if you are to put a distribution like this, it makes it extremely hard to see this and understand and read this. Okay. So, for the distribution type of charts, both column and line charts tend to work really well. What about XY plot? Why is it there? Well, XY plot is going to tell you on 2-dimensional space how things are distributed. For example, if this box is the map of San Francisco, very poor map, you can put dots wherever there is a technology company. So, that is going to tell me on the space of this box where technology companies are located. So, when you are talking about spatial distribution or things like that, an XY plot tends to work very well. For 1-dimensional distributions, you can use either a line, column chart, and that works very well. So, these are some time tested and common sense based principles, and you can blindly follow them most of the time, so that you will create good charts. Okay. Obviously, there will be some scenarios where this may not work, either because you have a boss who wants a bar chart for distribution, or you feel that for certain type of data or certain situation this is not going to work. But for about 90% of business situations, these will work. When you are talking about parts of whole, again these 4 charts are very much applicable. Whenever we say parts of whole, many people often prefer a pie chart. Pie charts are a favorite in business world. I was talking to somebody just before the lunch break, and he is saying that they use a lot of pie charts. This is quite common. How many of you use pie charts? Okay, don't feel shy. I use pie charts. So, let's play a small game. Okay, I'm going to. You can tell me if you can't see this marker. I wish they had a black one, but I'm going to draw 2 angles, because what is pie chart doing? It's telling you that this is the angle of this slice, this is the angle of that slice, and you are looking at them and you are making some decisions. So, I'm going to draw 2 angles here. Okay, let's call this as A. Okay. And let's call this one as B. Now, tell me which one is bigger? A or B? They are same? Same but looks different. How many for same? Great, great. Let me tell you a story now. This has got nothing to do with Excel. So, I have been a pretty good student all through my school days. I have got, I don't want to say straight A's, but yeah, really good grades throughout the school. And then after school, until school, I was staying really close to my parents. The school is pretty nearby, so my parents were keeping they are monitoring me very well, and there is very little freedom. Then I go to a diploma in a far off place, about 150 miles away from my school, and this is the first time I am living in a far off place from my parents, right? So I have this unlimited amount of freedom. I could go to movies all every day. Nobody is going to check on me, and I could not study for a couple of days if I want. So I kind of exploited that freedom. Until school, I have never until I finished the school, I have never failed in a single course. And then in the diploma, I was studying this computer science engineering diploma. So naturally, when you go for such courses in the very first year, they are going to teach you physics, mathematics, and engineering drawing, which is basically how do you make a plan, how do you prepare top view, front view, and stuff like that. So I enjoyed throughout the first year, and I go to this engineering drawing exam. I thought I did well, but when the results came, I failed in the engineering drawing exam. Okay. The whole point is, you are telling me A is equal to B, and I failed in drawing. Okay. So now go ahead and think again. You are talking to a person who failed in drawing. Well, maybe we can say A is equal to B, but it is highly unlikely that A is equal to B for sure. There might be a few degrees difference here and there. But the reason why we are not able to say for sure which one is bigger or smaller, because we are not good at measuring angles. Okay? We cannot compare one angle with another and say for sure they are equal, or one is bigger or one is smaller, unless the difference is huge. If I draw two angles where one of them is 30 degrees roughly and the other is 60, we don't have any doubts. Like this one, and if I draw one more like this, you have no doubts that this is the bigger one. But the moment this and that are getting close to each other, we cannot compare and say that. But if you were to twist this comparison, if you were to present this in a different way by saying, this is first line A and that is the second line B, starting from the same base point. And if the difference is just minute, like less than 5% difference, you won't have any confusion whatsoever. All the people, including my 6-year-old kids, can clearly tell me that the first line is taller. This is because when it comes to measuring heights or measuring widths and comparing one with another, we are really good. Our eyes are trained to compare lengths and heights very, very well. But when it comes to comparison of angles or comparison of areas, we are not going to do any good job. That's why when you make a pie chart, you are putting your audience in a difficult position. They will have to go and compare the angles and come up with some sort of meaningful judgments. So what happens when you make a pie chart with, let's say, more than 4 or 5 slices? Your boss or your colleagues might scratch their head and say, you know what, why don't you put labels on it? Okay, because I can't read all the numbers. Just like that pie chart there, maybe we can say confidently that the green one is the biggest one. But between the blue one and the yellow one, or yellow one and orange one, we are not 100% sure which one is what and what kind of values they might be. So what happens? We put the labels on them. Once the labels are there, the data labels, what is the pie chart doing there? People are always going to look at the numbers. So now pie chart becomes the decoration. Okay. So for this reason, if possible, we can avoid pie charts in business communication. That said, pie charts are some things that people are used to looking at, and many office communication templates and report layouts already have pie charts in them, so people tend to make them. We will see what happens when you create them when we are playing with Excel. Any questions or any comments at this point? Okay. The next one is trend over time. Whenever you are talking about trend over time, you can use one of these three types of charts: column or line or the table. Now, why not a bar chart? This is because when we think of time, we usually think of time as a horizontal concept. Okay? We usually talk to somebody and we say, you know, yesterday I was talking to somebody in the lobby, last year I was in France, and next year I'm going to Europe, things like that. As if, you know, next year is ahead of us and last year is behind us. So, we view time as a horizontal concept. We think yesterday is something that is behind and tomorrow is ahead of us, and this is true. So, when you talk about time on a chart, you want to keep the time on the horizontal axis, the x axis. So, when time is on the x axis, these are the only kind of charts that you can imagine. What would happen if the time is on the vertical axis? Well, it makes it very hard to read. If you put months on the y or the vertical axis, people reading it, they need to mentally transpose that image before coming up with any sort of conclusions. So, for that reason, when you talk about trend, you want to make sure that you are using one of these three types of charts. Yes, please.
So, what if your reader is because time is from left to right, usually it's represented that way. What if your audience or your client is somebody that reads from right to left? Will you change, or how would you need to change it, or is there a need to change it, or are they used to?
I haven't had much experience with, you know, audience like especially Arabic countries where reading is from right to left, but that said, maybe the labels can be mentioned like that, but the flow of time is that concept is pretty much universal. You know. Even people who read it from right to left, they might still consider, I have no experience, I mean, if anybody in the audience deal with such people, you can tell me, or if you are one of them. But personally, it seems to me that time is a concept more like in our mind, right? We view time as a horizontal concept, so that shouldn't really change. Any other questions? Okay. We'll create some charts. When you create them in Excel, you can actually experience what kind of a discomfort or difficulty that will create for us when you view such a chart with time either mentioned from right to left or on the top to bottom kind of thing. You can use one of these charts for the deviation. Again, at this point it might be very clear to you that no matter what chart we are using, tables and columns and bar charts tend to do well. That's because they are really easy to make, they are really easy to read, and you know, they don't hide much. Whatever the message is, it will just jump out of the screen and people can read and understand it very easily. When you are mentioning any relationship related messages, you can use either lines or XY plots. XY plots by definition are for plotting two variables like X and Y, or sales versus temperature, things like that, and that can give you an idea about if there is any relationship present. Obviously, finding relationships is really hard, both in life, in Excel, but what you can do is when you present the data, when you create an XY plot, you are really saying that there might be a relationship here, at least that behavior is exposed by this chart. For example, if you take you know, ice cream sales versus temperature on a day, based on some historical data, at least we can clearly see that as the temperatures rise, more and more ice creams would be consumed. But that doesn't really mean that if the temperature goes up by another 100 degrees, more ice creams would be consumed. You know, probably we all will be extinct if that happens. So the concept that I'm trying to drive here is there are two things: correlation and just coincidence. So what happens is sometimes your business data might be just coincidental, but whatever that could be, when you plot it on an XY chart, that becomes very clear for you to see, examine, and go test the hypothesis in the market. Okay, so those are the six type of chart, and we have seen the 6 messages, and now you have a simple mapping. For this message, I am going to use this chart. These are thumb rules. So that means for about 90% of situations, you can just use them and be safe. But there will be some scenarios where you have to go beyond these thumb rules and create some custom charts. That's what we are going to do next after the presentation is over. But now that you prepared the chart, the last step is you need to remove distractions. This is because Excel is a very enthusiastic software, right? So what it does is whenever you create a chart, it would add a lot of bells and whistles to it by default. This is more true in the older versions of Excel. With 2010 and 13, not much of distractions are being added, but you can still see them once we create some charts later during this session. So the very first rule when you want to remove distractions is, just say no to anything that is over the top. There has been a video a while ago called Gangnam Style. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. It's a video where you can see some extravagant and colorful lifestyle of people in a part of South Korea, Seoul, Gangnam district. And the point that we are trying to make here is, don't make things too colorful and dramatic. Just keep it really simple, because simple is very, very hard to achieve. But if you can keep your communication simple and just state it in fewer charts and fewer colors and fewer fonts, there is nothing like it. Okay. Couple of tips, we will observe them when we make some charts in Excel. No non-zero axis scale on bar charts. What it means, why it is important, we will see it in Excel once we play with some charts. Anything that is non-data, like the grid lines or the labels and those kind of things, you can make them subtle. Okay, just choose a color that is really almost blending with the background, so that they're not going to scream and get the same amount of attention as the data points. Okay. You can add data points to any important items on the chart, like the month with highest sales. You can add a label there. Put a very clear, bold title. Can you imagine a slide without a title? Just like that, a chart should have a title that clearly states its purpose and what is the story behind that. You can put your axis, scales, etc. in the right place. For example, coming back to your question, if somebody reads from right to left, maybe the axis should be on that side of the chart, even though the flow of information is from left to right. Because they are used to looking from right and going there, you can put the axis there, so it makes it easy for them. This is more relevant for even people who don't read from right to left. Let's say you are plotting the sales trend of a company like Walmart. Now they are in operations for more than 60 years, and for some reason you want to create a line chart that shows the sales trend for the last 65 years. So you make a line. Obviously, for a big company like Walmart, this would be a line going from this point of the screen all the way there, like a diagonal. Now when that happens, obviously this chart is made for some reason, but if the vertical axis is kept on the left side, this makes it very hard to read, because even though the line is drawn, most of the time our focus will be on the rightmost parts. We have the line, but we are going to look at what happened immediately now and last few years. So since we are going to look there all the time, we need to scan with our eyes from this corner to all the way here, just to know what those values are, because the labels are here. So in such case, you can move the axis here so that it's easy to read, and use simple and easy colors. Now that you have understood the 4 steps and you feel confident about creating charts, maybe you are thinking, what about those complex types of charts, like a box plot or a waterfall chart or any of those kind of things. How do I create them? You're not even talking about any of them. What do I do? Here is my suggestion. Avoid them. Okay, as much as possible, just avoid any complex chart that you cannot easily create in Excel. This might be little counterintuitive, because you might be thinking, oh, you talk about complex charts all the time, how come you're telling me to avoid it? Well, I talk about it mainly because I run a blog, and this is my job, right? Talking and explaining to people how to create them. But purely from a communication point of view, what I found is, if you can use a column, line, those kind of charts all the time, they are really easy to understand. They save you a ton of time as an analyst, and they save a ton of time for the readers. So it's a double win, right? You can make it in 10 minutes, your boss can read it in 1 minute. Whereas a complex chart like a box plot or a waterfall, it will take you 3 days to make, and your boss will probably spend 10 minutes reading it first time, every time maybe another extra 5 minutes. So it's a incremental time for everybody in the system. So please avoid complex charts. In case you don't understand, please avoid them. And if your job requires that you should use these complex charts, you can use a template. That is, you create the chart once, save it as a template, and reuse it next time you have different data. This way you don't waste a lot of time, and maybe you can spend that extra time to train your users how to read these charts. You can use an add-in which will create the chart from you by taking the raw data and doing all these steps for you. The last one would be making these charts yourself one step at a time. This is where you would require some advanced Excel skills and lots of patience and coffee. Okay. And in case you are not listening, please avoid these charts. Okay. Here are a couple of resources to learn more. I'm sure you will see them in the PDF of the presentation. We have a category called visualization where hundreds of charts are available, both simple charts, complex charts, some good tips and concepts and principles that you can follow. You can download almost all of them so that you can play with your data, understand the formula logic and other steps that are used. And John Peltier has an extensive website on Excel charts that explains how to create almost any type of complex chart. So you can check out his website. There are a couple of books as well. Before we move into Excel, any questions? Yes, please. Yeah, I think they're okay. We'll create some combination charts now, but again, the way it would happen is a combination is not going to add to complexity, it is going to multiply the complexity. So if let's say a column chart takes 2 seconds to read and a line chart takes 2 seconds, a combination chart is not going to take 2 plus 2. Turns out 2 multiplied by 2 is also 4, but you get the picture, right? If it quickly adds up as you build the complexity. And sometimes with the combination charts, you need to add extra elements to explain the chart, like a secondary axis, more labels, more colors, and the more these things are added, the more complex it becomes, and your users will struggle, and even you will struggle, because you have to set it up very carefully, follow all the steps, move things behind and front and all that. But there are ways to speed up, and yeah, you can use them. I use them for some very special purposes. Yes. Any other questions? Okay, so we will wrap up this presentation. We will continue our discussion with by creating charts in Excel. Now at this point, let me briefly share what else we are going to talk about, because that's not part of the presentation. And let me duplicate this. So those of you who are working with a computer, you can open up Excel. I am using Excel 2013 here to demonstrate. You can follow along. In case you are missing a couple of steps, or if you feel that you are not able to understand certain formula or something that we are writing, you can ask me, or if you want, you can also wait until the end of the session, at which point I will send this workbook to you. You as in, I'll send them to the conference people, and they will email everybody who signed up for this class. Okay, so that way you can download this workbook, and later on you can practice. So anybody in this room who is using a version of Excel that's not 2013? Okay, so few people, almost everybody is on 2013, which is good. But those of you who are coming from an older version of Excel, you can see that the screens are vastly similar to what you would see in 2007 or 2010. The primary thing to keep in mind is the ribbon, which is going to explain all the features for us. And what we will do now is we are going to create three types of charts. One is for communicating budget versus actual, or budget versus target, or actual versus target kind of information, wherein you have certain budget and you have spent so much of actual or things like that. So how to communicate such information through charts, what kind of charts you would create, how do you enhance them, etc. The second thing is we are going to talk a little bit about how to showcase trends and forecasts in charts. So that one we will do. And then if time permits, we are also going to look at some comparison types of charts, how to highlight a certain element in the chart using some simple techniques. Okay. Feel free to ask me questions, otherwise I will just continue speaking. Okay. So just open up a blank Excel workbook and let's imagine that we are looking at a very simple scenario. We have a target of 100 and we have an actual of 80. Now this could be a fundraising scenario or a product sales target and actual, or it could be a salesperson targets, or any of those kind of things that you see in business often. Right now we only have this data for one particular type of thing, like a fundraising for one person, okay, but you could have this potentially for hundreds of such products or such items. Now given this, how do you convey the information that we are less than target in a chart? Obviously you can look at those two numbers and come to that conclusion, but for that you don't have to come all the way here. So we are going to make some charts and see how to convey this information in a chart. One of the charts that I recommend for this kind of information is called as a thermometer chart. So we are going to create that. Along way you can see some of the steps and ideas that we are talking and how to use them for your work. The way this thermometer chart looks like is this. You have a column, and this is usually blank, just with an outline, and you have one more which kind of fills up inside like that. So this is pretty much what a thermometer would look like. Okay, it's filling up as you reach the target. So at 100% this is 100% full, at 50% this is 50% full. So it tells you the story that we have done this much, we have so much white space to cover. So how do I create this kind of a chart? That's what we are going to talk about and create this chart. So once you have typed some numbers, these could be any numbers, just select them and insert a column chart. Okay. So when you do that, hopefully your image of column chart looks like this. In case you have the columns in different colors, don't worry, but hopefully the image is something similar. Now given this, at least on my computer, I could immediately see that both of these columns are in the same color. This means Excel is thinking they are part of the same series in the chart. Excel charts will have series of data, so Excel is thinking all of this is same data, let me put that in the same color. But we know these are two different things, right? One is target, one is actual. So the very first thing I need to do, if your columns are in the same color, you also need to do this, is to select the chart, go to design and click on this switch row column button. This way what happens is the chart will be switched so that it contains two series, each with one value. Okay. So this is the picture that we are aiming to create. Once this is there, what we wanted is really an outline as one box and another box internally that is filling up, whereas we now have two boxes. So the next step is we want to overlap this one on top of another and format them. So click on any one of the columns, it does not matter which one you click, press Ctrl 1 for formatting. Ctrl 1 is a very easy to remember shortcut. Whatever you are doing in Excel, whatever item you are on, you can select that, press Ctrl 1, it will format it. Okay. So press Ctrl 1, that opens up the format options for the data series, and if you are already on the series options, otherwise you need to click on that little column thing where you see overlap, make 100% overlap. So you need to push it all the way to the end. In 2010 version of Excel, you won't probably see it on the panel here, you will see a box, but same steps. So, we need to make the series overlap 100%. Once you do that, you should get a picture like this. Okay. Now, in case you do not even see the orange one, the blue one is overlapping 100%, that is the orange one is behind. What you can do is you can right click on the chart, go to select data and see the names. This should be the order: target, actual. Target is on the top, actual is on the bottom. This means this will be printed on the top of the other one. Okay. So, it seems a little counterintuitive, but the way it works is whatever is the first item in your chart data, that goes in the background, the second item goes on top of it. So, we want this order. If it is like this, you won't even see the orange one. So, you need to rearrange them using those arrow keys. Once it is in this way, what we wanted was an outline for the outer box and this one filling up. So, select the outer box and we will just format it. We go to format, shape fill should be no fill and shape outline should be whatever color you fancy, blue, red, green. At this point, our thermometer is more or less ready, but we can still do a little bit of cleanup. We can change the color of internal thing as well. So, everything is in blue and it is easy to see. So, something like this. So, now we created the picture that we have in our mind, which is two columns. One is showing the target, the other is showing the actual, and the actual is reaching the target as you make progress. Any questions or doubts at this point? Yes, please.
What if I have actuals from 3 regions, 1, 2 and 3? Can I compare that to the target?
Yeah, you can. What you would do in such case is, let us say you have like that. So, that is region 1. The target, let us say it is the same one, but the actuals are different, like this is 75 and that is 90. You would follow the same process, but create 3 columns. Okay. Let me show you a little later in the session. Once we are done with this, I will show you how to extend this so more data can be added to the chart. Yes, please.
What if the actual turned out to exceed the target?
Yeah, that's a good question, and we will see what happens. At this point, we are under the impression that the mercury is not going to go beyond the thermometer, but that happens in business all the time, right? You have 105, and at this point, all hell breaks loose. So, we see many things have happened. Okay. To begin with, the blue outline is not even visible on my computer, but that is one. The second thing is the axis got resized. Okay. At least here I can see that my axis is now starting at 97 and going up to 106. First, let us fix the axis problem, then we will go ahead and understand how you can incorporate some variations of thermometer when the target could be less than actual. Let me go back to the 80-100 picture. You can see, for example, when I have 100 and 90, this is the thermometer that Excel produced. What kind of an impression this gives to you? It makes us feel that we are only 40% of the target, we have so much more to cover, but that is not the true picture, right? We covered 90%. That is because we are starting at a non-zero point. This is what I meant in the presentation. Start your column and bar charts at 0 all the time. If you start at a non-zero point, you create false impression. Okay. So, we need to fix the axis. Select the axis and press Ctrl 1 to format it and set the axis minimum to 0. Okay. When you do that, this will fix the chart for us. So, it always starts from 0. so that we can easily compare one item with another. We can only do comparisons when the baseline is same. If the baseline is somewhere arbitrary, we can't do good comparisons. Okay, now that that problem is fixed, let's go ahead and see what happens when we exceed the target. At this point, there are a couple of things that you could do. One is we can let's say this is our outline of the thermometer, and this is the filling portion. Now, as long as we are like this, it's good, but the moment we exceed, we have trouble. So, at this stage, there are different charts that you can create to convey the information. The standard questions my students at least ask me when I do a class like this is, I want to show the excess in a different color, right. So, until 100 I want to show blue, but the moment we exceed, I want to show it in green color or something like that. So, this is one way of conveying that we are beyond the target. The other is just show it, but make sure that I can see the boundary, okay. Something like this, at which point we are exceeding the target you want to see. So, these two are possible. There are more variations based on your questions. We will try to modify this, but first let me show you how we can convey the information that we are exceeding the target by at least showing the boundary of 100. Right now that is missing. So, what you can do is with 2010 and 13, I believe in 2007 as well, you can select the actual column, go to format, and where the fill color is done, go to more fill colors and set some transparency to it. Right now it is 0% transparent, that means it is completely visible. Let us make it 20% transparent. This way you could see the faint line. Right now the grid lines are actually, if I delete the grid lines, you can see that faint outline is visible. So, it is as if this thing is transparent, and you can still make out that at 100 our target is there and we are now beyond the target. So, using a little bit of transparency, you can convey the missing information, because this one is overlapping that one. Okay. You can even play with order of the series. You can go to select data and adjust the order of things, so that the blue one is on top of the outline is on top of the filling column, so that it is always visible. These kind of things can be done, so that you are adjusting things in one layer at a time, so that we can get that picture. Do you want to know how to turn the top portion alone into a different color? Okay, let us do that. So, the way to do the top portion alone in a different color is, it is basically we need to fake that effect, because there is really no such thing in Excel like turn that little balance into a different color. When you change the color, the entire thing is changing. So, for example, I go and change this to green color, all of it is going to become green, not just the top portion alone. So, we will have to create it in such a way that there are two portions of this column, one up to the target and one beyond the target, and color them individually, but position them together so that that kind of an impression is created. So, wherever we did our original numbers, I am going to write two more values. Up to target and beyond target. Now, the logic for this would be fairly simple. I am assuming most of you have familiarity with Excel formulas, so I am going to write it, but if any of you have difficulty understanding or what it is doing, let me know, and we will go ahead and examine that. I am going to save this file before I forget. Okay. Let's try with something like this and see if this works. Yeah. So I wrote two different formulas, one is a min and one is a max formula. You can write if formulas also, either way it is fine. The way we are trying to do is up to the target should be, it can be a value from 0 to 100, but after 100 it will stop. This is the blue colored one. Okay. Beyond target will be the green one. Okay. So this is going to be in blue, that is the value for the green colored bar. So the blue one should stop at 100 even if the values are beyond 100. The green one should be at whatever is the difference between blue and green. I think the difference thing is not going to work, so I'm going to live with that for some time. So now that we have set up this, let's go ahead and create one more chart, but this time we are going to select the target and these target, and you hold the control key and select the other two items. So excluding the actual, just select the rest of them using control. And let's insert one more column chart. So we get 3 columns instead of 2. We may have to modify our calculations because this approach is not perfect, but let's roll with it. So select the columns because they are, Excel is thinking they are all different. Let's go ahead and switch them and format and adjust the overlap. So now everything is overlapped one on top of another, and let's go ahead and format it. This would be blue color, that little thing would be green color, and we have one more series that's not even visible here, the outline one. If you want to select any item on the chart that's not visible or easy to click, you can go to your select the chart item and you can go to your format ribbon. There, using the drop down, you can select the items. So you can select the target and format it by saying it should have no fill and it should have an outline. Okay. So that way, even items that are not easily accessible by clicking on chart, you can easily find them and format them. Now all of this is fine. The only thing is the green thing is all the way at the bottom. We wanted it to be at the top. Okay. So one easy method would be if I could somehow change this 5 to 105, that way the green one will show up. We will have to now fix the axis as well. In case you have not done it, you can fix your axis minimum to 0. So if I can change my beyond target value to 105 instead of 5, I can see a green color bar. The only thing is it is green all the way, but we will fix that a little later. So this is, we will write a new formula here. Let's get rid of the max formula. If actual is greater than target, get me the actual value, else 0. So this way it will be 0 or the actual value depending on the value of it. So if only when we exceed the target, the green value will be present. You can go to your chart, select data settings and adjust the order of it. Okay. Beyond target should be behind that one. So once you fix the order of things, the blue one will be always visible. The green one will only be visible when there is when it is beyond the 100, and the target is the last layer to be drawn. In fact, we can even bring it down like that. So this is how you can create that illusion that anything that is going beyond 100 will be in a different color. If you adjust the values, if this becomes 90, the green thing is gone. The moment we reach 100, we start seeing the green color. Okay. 101, we see a little bit of green. So this is how you can add some extra elements to the chart that will conditionally disappear or appear based on any formula or chart series overlay and those kind of techniques. Questions or doubts? If you do some extra calculations like this, these are all good, but you don't want them to be visible on your final report. So, what if I want to hide them? Well, it turns out if you hide them, even the chart is changing, right? If I hide both of these, the chart is suddenly only showing the target value, it is not even showing the other values. This is because by default Excel charts are set up in such a way that they do not display data in the hidden cells, but you can tell Excel to do that. You can right click on the chart, go to select data, click on this little button here, hidden and empty cells, and tell Excel to show data in the hidden and empty hidden rows and columns. This way, even when the items are hidden on the screen, they will still be used for plotting your chart data. Okay. So, this using this method you can keep your calculations clean and the chart can show up. Yes, please.
Can you do that again real quick?
Sure. Right click on the chart, select data, and then this button, hidden and empty cells, and check that box. Well, we still need to play with these calculations, so I am going to unhide them, but you can use that technique. The other technique, which is I highly recommend, especially if you have lots of charts and each chart requires some sort of a calculation, is to divide your workbook into 3 different buckets. This is more useful when you are making a complex report or a dashboard or some such thing where lots of number crunching and lots of data needs to be there. So, the 3 bucket approach is like this. Your first bucket, it could be a set of worksheet tabs or just one worksheet with lots of things. The first bucket is your data. So, all the input data, all the data that you are connecting and bringing to this workbook will go into that particular tab. The second bucket is calculations. So, from the data tab, your calculation tab is generated by taking the data and doing some number crunching, like your VLOOKUPs, your pivot tables, your simple if formulas, sums and counts and whatnot. And the third bucket is output. Okay. With this approach, what happens is you can keep things isolated. Usually when you are building something like a complex report, these are very simple charts, but when you are building a sales dashboard or a productivity tracker or things like that, lots of things would change over the course of time. Initially you will develop something, after 6 months your boss or your colleagues might say, hey, you know what, we should include that extra piece of information here because that's relevant, or they might even say things like, I don't like this, just remove this. All of these changes are pretty much common in business environment. So, when the change is happening, if everything is together like this, making the changes becomes extremely hard. Changes can happen to your data sources, that is where your data is coming from, how the data is coming, and the way calculations are done, how do you consider a certain item is beyond target, what is the definition of that, and output, how do you make the chart, what colors should be used, what kind of details should be presented. So, usually changes happen across the spectrum like that. When you divide your workbook into those 3 buckets, you can easily isolate the changes and make those changes. For example, if the data source is changing, suddenly people are not going to copy paste the data, they are going to connect to a database, you will only change the data worksheet. The other worksheets will remain clean and they will still work as long as the basic assumptions about the structure of data are holding good. So, you can use such an approach, so that way you do not have to even face a problem of hiding calculations or anything, because the calculations are in a separate worksheet. So, you can hide the entire worksheet if you feel your boss is going to mess up things for you. Okay. So, this is one more approach that you can follow. Anyway, coming back to the discussion on charts, before we go ahead and make some more changes here, any questions from whatever you have seen so far? Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
So, which is the 100%. Now, if you change that from 101 to 90, what color is that?
It will only showing this much. The green thing won't even be there.
So the gray is now the actual, and before the gray was
No, it's as if the gray or the blue thing is going to become green because we surpassed the target. That's the kind of picture that we are trying to create. Does it make sense? So it will be blue until you reach 100. After that, any value more than 100 will be shown in a different color. So up to 100 it will be like that, but the moment it is beyond 100, only that little portion is in a different color. Any other questions? Yes, please.
But you can't put the actual amount, right? Because it doesn't point to the actual.
Or you can put the actual amount. You can add a label to one of them. For example, let's click on this. There are 3 different amounts in this chart, so you can add the label to one of them. For example, let us add, I can't select that one, so I'm going to go here and
It shows it when it's beyond target, but once it's below the target, it won't try it or
so we'll add a label here. Let's see what happens for various scenarios. So it shows 100, which is incorrect, right? The value should be 110. So what you could do is, this is one approach where you add the label and this turns out to be incorrect. You can fix this in a couple of ways. I'll show you an easier option than fixing the label. Oh, we can even go with this. Yeah, in 2013 they made it simpler. So you select the label and you go to your label options here where it says show the value. We don't want to show the original value, we want to show some other value in some cell. So you click on value from cells option. Excel asks you, so where is the value for this label? I'm going to show me that value instead. So that value comes up. We only want that value, so we'll uncheck this. So it shows as 110 because it's now linked to that cell. Okay. In the older versions of Excel, this feature is not available. So we could use another idea, which is select the chart, go to insert and click on your text box button and add a text box to the chart. Okay. We can type 110 into the text box, but that's not going to work when the values change. So select the text box, click on the formula bar, press equal to. This text box should be equal to that value. So select that cell. So that way the value will show up. It's a text box, so you can format it any way you want. And that's going to be there. You can change the values, it will change automatically. So both approaches can be used. In fact, you can even assign a formula to a label, but I guess that will be even more slightly confusing, so I didn't even show that. Okay, any other questions? The second question that somebody asked me during the break is, you in the presentation we were talking about simple charts, right? We are saying, stick to a regular column or line chart and use it. Whereas as soon as the presentation ended, we started to create a thermometer chart, which is not a simple chart. That's because the principles are like this: use a column, line or bar chart. As long as you stick to that paradigm, technically this is still a column chart. We are not trying to come up with something drastically new. The thermometer concept is something that we are all familiar with, so it's not entirely new. The second reason why I am encouraging you to learn about a technique like this is, it's very unlikely that in a business situation you are only comparing 2 numbers. Okay, you are probably comparing 2 numbers, that is target and actual, for 100 different products. So when you have such a vast amount of data, then using 2 columns, one for target, one for actual, means you will have 200 columns, 2 each for one product, so 100 products, 200 columns, and that makes it extremely cluttered and comparison becomes hard. Whereas with thermometer approach, you only have 1 thermometer per chart, and that will be slightly more elegant solution to such problems. Okay. This is also true for the question somebody in the back asked earlier: what if I have 3 regions Well, you can use similar setup and set up the chart for 3 regions. So, let me very quickly show you how once you build a chart like this, extend it so it can show work for multiple regions. We will use our original chart, not the green one. So, I am going to bring this one back, and so this is the chart. This one is using that much data, only one region's data, and we now have 2 more regions, and we would like to add those regions to the chart. You can do it in multiple ways. One option is you can go to select data and change the range of data that is fed to the chart. You can also click on each of the region, each of the items in the chart, and when you select an item like a column, Excel highlights what is the name and what is the data. So, usually name is in one color and the data is in another color. Now, the data is currently one cell wide, so it is shown in blue color like that. Place your mouse pointer on the edge. When it changes as an arrow, just drag it like that. So, you will get 3 more columns. Likewise, we will extend this. So, this way from the same chart setup, now instead of having 1 thermometer, we will get 3. This will be useful when you are working for lots of data. You first build it for one, make sure the formatting and the colors and everything is easy, then you just extend it like this. Now that we created a thermometer chart, let us go ahead and do a little bit of cleanup work on this. We talked about making the charts and then cleaning. So, we created the chart, now let us go ahead and clean up. What are the things that we need to clean up in this chart? We could get rid of x axis or we could add make the x axis meaningful. Right now it just says 1, 2, 3, it should be region 1, region 2, region 3, otherwise it does not make any sense. So, you can right click on the chart, select data, and where it says horizontal category axis labels, edit them and point them to those 3 items there. So, using the select data, we can set the labels to whatever we want. So, that way the region names would show up there. The second approach, second thing that you can clean up is the title. You can get rid of the title if this is obvious to your audience, or you can add a descriptive title. For example, you can say something like this, target performance by region. That seems to tell your audience what this is about. This is the standard titles that we often use in charts and presentations. The next step in a title would be to make the title more meaningful or tell even more powerful story. For example, with 3 regions it is a little hard, but if you have operations in all the 50 states of USA and you create a chart like this for 50 states, and you say something like target performance by state, you could also add a subtitle that will tell you that can give some extra insights. For example, you could say subtitle can be something like 16 states have exceeded targets. That is a useful insight right there. Or you could even say something like average target performance is 75%. That means on average across states we reached 75% of the target, or even a breakup of performance in a zone, like how many are less than target, how many are at the target, and how many are above the target. So, you can add some descriptive subtitle to the chart so that it becomes useful, because what is the first thing that you look at when your users are looking at a chart? They are going to look at the title and then go into the detail. So, in the title itself you make it absolutely clear what this is about and what are the key messages. That simplifies the job for you and your audience. You could go ahead and think about certain other elements. For example, with the thermometer kind of a setup, I would often what I would do is I will get rid of this axis itself and then just add the labels or some other indicator here. If everything is measured against 100%, then probably the axis is not going to do a lot of extra detail. So, we can even remove that and provide it at a high level. This would be even more relevant when you have 50 states or things like that, 100 products. You do not really need to be very specific in such scenario. All people would care at that level is whether we are meeting the target or not. If not, then go into the next step, which is how much are we lagging, why are we lagging, those kind of questions. So, probably the vertical axis is not something that you need in a setup with multiple states, etc. Okay. So, you can get rid of that if you do not want. The other thing that you may want to do is the amount of white space. In this situation, the white space seems to be okay, but if you look at a single column thermometer, there is just lots of white space here. So, if you want, you can get rid of some amount of white space by selecting the columns, going to your format data series options and adjusting the gap width. By default, this would be some sort of a random number like 215 or something like that. You can adjust it to be 50 or 100%. For example, if this is 100%, the columns are slightly wider and more evenly spaced. If it is 50, then the white space is going away. So, you can see what happens, more space is given to the columns, which is the story part. The white space is just there to separate things out. Why even bother with that? Well, if you can adjust the white space, you can then resize the chart and use the extra space for something else. Okay. So, that is why adjusting and tweaking those things will help you optimize the amount of real estate you have on the screen and use those balance space for some other insights or telling some additional insights. Okay. Any questions so far? Oh yeah, you could. This is a far simpler example, but once you have this kind of things flowing in, you would either sort them in some meaningful order, or you will give your users some choice on how to sort. Since we started talking about that, let us go ahead and make something fun. For example, imagine we are managing 100 different products. So, we have product and we have target and actual. So, it is product 1, and for the time being, let us keep the target as 100, but this could change depending on your some situation. We need to type the actual values, and I am very lazy, so I do not want to type 100 values. So, what I am going to do is I am going to ask Excel to generate a random number between 80 and 120. So, some value that is less than target or more than target, and let us drag this down. So, you see 100 products. Make sure the target is set to 100, but it does not matter what these values are. So, once you have a setup like this, we can go and create a thermometer chart that can communicate all of this information, and when that happens, it might be a good idea to arrange these products based on either alphabetical order or the order of product categories, which is quite common in companies, or even the order of performance, what is the actual achievement in descending order or in ascending order. So, once you have something like that, let us go ahead and create a thermometer chart for this kind of thing. So, you select both columns like that and you insert because we already have a setup like this, each product in one line, let us make a thermometer chart in the horizontal fashion. The one we did with column charts, we will do with bar charts as well. Okay. So, something like this would come up. So, this is what I meant by 200 bars. Right now, it has all the information, but reading this can be really hard because there is just so much of data. Okay. Whereas, if we could rearrange this as thermometers, at least each one will fit into one product's row, so it can be slightly easier. So, when you do this, especially with the bar charts like this, one of the problems that Excel creates for us is, you see the order here, product 1 on the top, product 100 at the bottom. The order for this chart is reverse, product 1 here, product 100 on the top. Okay. So, this creates an extra headache for us when you want to position the data and the chart one next to another. You can tell Excel to reverse the axis, right click on that and press Ctrl 1, and this will open up the axis options. You will say categories in reverse order, so that this will flip the chart for us and show 1 on top and 100 at the bottom. We can go ahead and repeat the steps for thermometer creation. I have already shown you a few times, so I am going to just do it myself here very fast. And once you do a little bit of cleanup, like get rid of the title and axis and stuff like that, and resize the chart, you tend to notice those thermometers very easily. Okay, I don't want to push too much, but so here is one version of it. It's not perfect, but you can see that creating like this, this is something that I get. It's not as tall as the original data, but at least it's tall enough. And this is where the white space is also playing the spoil sport, because there is just too much white space. The thermometers are really tiny, but once you fix that, once you adjust the gap width to 10% or something like that, that way more space is given to them, and adjust the order in the data source. Once you do all of those tweaks that you have seen earlier in the day, this looks and feels more like the shape that we want it to be, and then when you apply sorting, it can be really powerful to see. You can apply the filters and sort it based on the largest to smallest. Before you sort, you must replace the formulas, because these are all random numbers, right? The moment you sort, Excel will generate a new set of numbers and the chart won't look good. So, I am going to just replace these formulas with values by copy pasting as value. And once you sort, you can see the trend of how product 38, your data might vary, is exceeding, and as you move down, some other products are behind. So, usually when you have so much of data, like lots of columns or lots of lines, it's always a good idea to sort the chart in some sort of a meaningful fashion, like by values or by some categories or by alphabetical order. Okay. Questions? Okay, enough with the thermometer charts. We have seen some examples. My intention of showing these things is twofold. One is to show you how to create them and how to use them in communicating business insights. The second is to also tell you that almost anything, any kind of picture that you imagine in mind can be created with Excel by a little bit of tweaking and using the options and the features that are out there. Let's talk about another problem that is quite common. Let us say you have some business data and you are asked to present that data, for example, sales data for the last few months, and you are also asked to do a forecast of the next 3 months. So, how do you present such kind of data where actual is there and forecast is also there, but you don't want people to confuse that the forecast is the same as actual data. So, we have some month and sales, and we have Jan, Feb and March data, and for April, May and June we are forecasting based on that. So, we had 100 and 120 and 140 sales in these 3 months. Because they are going up, you went ahead and forecasted by saying, in April we might have 150, then 165 and 180. Now, to a layman or anybody, after you make this, anyone looks at this, they might think this is all actual data, but in reality this is the actual data and that is the forecast, right. So, you might even apply a different color and then say, these are the forecast values. But once you create a chart, once you select all of this and make a line chart from it, Excel does not care what color your data is in, everything is just one line. So, how do you make sure and differentiate that some of the items in the chart are in a different color or dotted or any of those kind of things, so that the forecast and actual values are appearing as two different things in the chart. That is what I wanted to show. So, let us say you have some data like this and you set it up like this. When you want to show, let us say, these 3 items, April, May, June. So, the line connecting from here through there, that portion should be a dotted line. This is what we wanted to create. I am going to draw a picture here, so it becomes easy for us to see what we are trying to build. So, we wanted a line there, but instead of just being a plain blue line, we wanted that line to look more like that, a dotted line, and this line will be a thick line because it is actual value. So, this is the kind of picture that we are trying to draw using a chart. So, when you want to do something like this, you can, again, all of this, there is no such thing like go to insert chart, and when you are selecting a line chart, you can't tell Excel after this point start drawing dotted lines. If you set it as a dotted line, everything is a dotted line. So, what we will do is we will have to fake that kind of an image by creating 2 separate lines and joining them at that point. Just like we did here, we made 2 different columns, but joined them and made one of them green, so it appears like that. So, this is, we will divide the data into 2 columns, actual and forecast. And let us copy paste it. So, two sets of data from the same data, we just divided it, and now let us create a line chart from that 2 sets. Okay. So, we will get something like this. I am going to delete the original chart. And if we format the second line as a dotted line, because that is what we were trying to do, and set that in the blue color, we seem to have achieved the effect. The only problem is there is just too much gap here. We would ideally like to have either a straight line or a dotted line connecting from here to there. Once we could achieve that, then our job is simplified. There are 2 simple ways to do this. You can put in either actual column or forecast column one of the missing values. So, for example, in the actual column, if I type 150, then this will go and connect there. Okay. Alternatively, you can go and do it here, you can type the 140 there. So, it will extend the dotted line this way. So, either way you can use that to connect these 2 series at that point. So, if you do it here, then you are connecting this one with that one at that point. So, this is how the line charts are drawn. They are drawn from one point to another. If the other earlier points are missing, Excel just does not do anything about them. So, using a technique like that, you can create a chart like this where actual and forecast are communicated by the same line, but your audience will clearly know what is actual and what is forecast. Questions or comments at this point? Now, you might be wondering, all of this is fine, but every month, right, this is something that happens on monthly basis. So, we are right now we have data up to March. So, you went ahead and forecasted for the remaining months, but then as at the end of April you also know what is the value for April. So, you came here and you typed the April value, which is 155. Okay. Now, you need to readjust your other column accordingly, and this seems to be a lot of manual work, right, but it does not have to be. What you would usually do is, although we just copy pasted the values, we will generate both of these columns through formulas completely. Okay. By that you can happily forget about that problem of correcting these two things, and the chart will only be created once, and it just works for all other situations. I leave the formulas to your imagination, but you can easily come up with the formula logic for checking here if this is a forecast or not, and accordingly managing these two columns. Okay. At this point I have a confession to make. Usually when I plan a session, I also budget for some questions, but you are not asking questions. What are we supposed to do? Well, we can talk about more charts, but I do not want to keep on talking, because sometimes I feel like maybe I am not getting my point across. Okay. So, this is your forecast example. The other example that I have in mind is comparison. Let us say, yes please. You can't really pin them to a particular column as such. For that you will have to use the labels feature with the value from cells option, but when you are adding a, like here, when you are adding a text box, if you select the chart first and then you go to your insert and insert a text box, this text box, right, I just wrote something in that. This text box technically belongs to that chart. So, you can't move it outside the chart. I am trying to move it outside. The moment I drag it outside, it does not come, right. It just it's a part of the chart now, because I selected the chart when I was inserting the text box. So, this way when you move the chart, the text box also moves. So, this is one simple way to tag those along, but the tagging is at a very high level, right. What would happen is with a line chart or these kind of charts you do not notice, but when with a column chart or a bar chart, right now we have 100 bars. So, you add a text box and you put something against the first product, but the moment you add 50 more products, naturally, because the chart size is not changing, it's only this high, but now it has to display 150 against 100 earlier. So, each bar will become thinner, okay. The height of the bars will reduce. So, then your text box is not going to change. So, it might look a little bit out of place, but for those kind of things you can use your data label feature and add the label source from a cell in 2013. So, this way those are tagged to the chart elements. Yes, you had a question. I answered myself. Okay, great. Okay, let us talk about comparison types of charts. When we looked in the presentation that when you want to do any type of comparisons, that is comparing one team against another team, or one region against another region, or one manufacturing location against another one, or any of those kind of comparisons, usually you can use a column or bar chart. Of course, there are other types of charts are also recommended, but these are the ones that tend to work really well. But sometimes when you are comparing, let's say you want to compare the performance in all the 50 states of your operations. So you're comparing, but you also have some biases, right? You're looking at this and you are wondering, I wonder how much we are doing in California, just because you are the regional head of California, or you are from California, or any of those reasons. So when you want to when your users have such inclinations, or they want to focus on a particular element out of all, although they are comparing each and every one, they still want to focus on a particular subset of items. When you want to do something like that, how do we create a chart? So for that, I am going to our product example, but just pick a handful of products, not 100, but maybe 15 or 20. And let's just say we don't have targets, we just have actual values, and you're looking at these and you want to compare them. Now these are all sorted, so every value is close to each other. I'm going to sort them A to Z and pick the values. Okay. Some values, some numbers all over the place, not near to each other like the sorted data I copied. So once we have something like this, if I insert a column chart from it, and I'm looking at this and trying to compare and come up with some conclusions, but at the same time I am also partial to product 68, because this is the product that I manage. So I would like to keep the product 68 in focus all the time. So how do you do that? Well, if it is just one product all the time, that is product 68 all the time, you can select that particular column and change its color. You can make it more blue, or in a different color altogether. So that is contrasted, and your mind and your eyes are always moving back to it because it's in a different color, and naturally you can compare against that with the rest of them. But this is more of a manual approach. What if, for example, I wanted to highlight the best performing product or worst performing product, or some such dynamic definition? You can undo that, and let's say we want to highlight the best one. So you can say max, and using some simple formulas, we'll create an extra column here, which will be having values only if the product is one of the top 3 products. Otherwise it will be blank. So this is something like, if that particular value, one of the top 3, that's our criteria. So we will simply ask, is it greater than or equal to the top 3rd value? Using the large formula, you can find out the 3rd highest value. So I'll select all of that and then say 3. So if the value for that product, is it greater than or equal to the 3rd highest value? If so, give me that value, else don't give anything. Okay, say 0. But if you want to be correct, you can say NA. Okay, either way it's fine. So what happens is, if a particular value is one of the top 3 values, it will show up, otherwise it will be blank. If there are ties, all the values will show up. So you can see that many of them are NAs, but some of them have values. Once you have that, you can add this data to the chart. How do you add some extra series to an existing chart? You can right click and go to select data and add series to it, or you can copy the data and select the chart and paste, as if you are copy pasting. So when you copy paste, it will add extra data to the chart. So it added wherever the max is available, it is in a different color. Although this picture is technically correct, this is not what we wanted. What we wanted was the original column itself should be in a different color. So at this stage, what you can do is select one of the columns and do the 100% overlap thing. So series overlap 100%. So the orange goes and sits on top of the blue. Okay. So this way, the max 3 products are always highlighted. Now, if your original numbers change, like the next month new set of data is pasted, so this is no longer 108, it is 80, that won't be highlighted, some other product gets highlighted. So, this remains dynamic because we are using some simple formulas to tell Excel what values go into the max series. Questions or doubts at this point? Okay. What else is wrong with this chart? What can we fix here? Sure. Yeah, sure. Excuse me. Okay, those of you who have the chart, if you look at least the chart on this projector screen, do you notice anything odd? One thing that I find slightly hard to read are the product names. Obviously, every word is product, so it's not that hard, but these inclined labels are something that Excel adds by default depending on how many labels are there and what data it is, etc. But normally speaking, none of us are good at reading that is stuff that is inclined or reversed or transposed vertically. We are good at reading stuff horizontally, either from right to left or left to right, depending on how we learn. So, anytime you see an inclined value in the chart, just get rid of that and make sure it is horizontal all the time. This is how our eyes are trying to read. So, your audience are not going to have an easy time reading them either. So, whenever the labels are added to the chart, make sure they are oriented properly. You can adjust the orientation in multiple number of ways. The easiest would be select the axis or the labels that have orientation problem, and in the home ribbon you see this little AB orientation button. Adjust the orientation. Unfortunately, there is no horizontal orientation. So, you click on one of them and then click on one of them again, that will fix the problem for us. When you do this, if you have too many items, it might take away a few. Okay. Earlier it was showing all the names, but now it is only showing some product names, the other ones are missing. You can play with the font sizes and some additional settings so that everything shows up, or if the values are, if the missing values can be inferred, then you can leave them out. I am going to stick to that level. Of course, some product names are missing, but that's not a very big problem because you never really have names like this. You will have some real life names there. The other things that you can do when you are working with charts are that the label formatting. Anything like these numbers and labels, usually you want to make sure they are all in a different font size compared to the title. Right now we don't have a title, so that's one of the problems with this chart, but the two other problems are, this one is in 9-point font size and that one is 8 points. So, make up your mind whether you want to go with 9 or 8 and make sure all of them are in the same size. Let us go with 8. So, select this and make this 8-point height. It is not enough if we adjust the font size, the font color itself should be in such a way that it does not get same amount of attention as the chart. Usually when you have a chart, anything that is in pure black, the black color text is something that we naturally go and read, because on print material or on screen, our eyes are naturally trying to go and look at the black color text and read it. So, you do not want them to look at these numbers right away, you want them to look at these columns and make inferences before coming back to those numbers. So, select them and make sure they are in a dull shade of gray color or something like that. Okay. When you are changing colors like this, let us say I just changed the color for that, and now I want to apply the same color for this one. if you want to do that, you don't have to select this and go here and press that again. You can just select that and press F4, which is the redo key. This will reapply the last action on the newer selection. So using the function key 4, you can repeat the steps faster, like reducing the font size or changing colors or any of those kind of repetitive actions. You do it once and you press F4, so others will, the same thing applies to other setting. Okay. Yes, please. Sorry.
Typically shows us more of a horizontal bar because of your labels in a data set. Since this is a time series, there's a horizontal bar chart instead of as a column.
For this kind of data? Yeah, it's up to you, however you want. We so happen to create a column chart, but a bar chart would do equally fine here. Yeah. With this kind of names, I would usually use a bar chart, because then, as you rightly said, the names can be fit into the column and they will read better. Any other questions? Okay. Some of the principles that we talked about, adding a title, making sure the colors are simple and dull, these are things that you can apply across board no matter what type of chart you are creating, etc. If you go to your insert and charting area, you would see that there are many other charts. We have not really talked about any of them. For example, as a rule, you can avoid any of the 3D charts. Okay, they are really difficult to read, and unless we get some sort of 3D displays or something, don't even bother creating them. Just stick to 2D charts, because projector screens are 2D, your monitors are 2D, printouts are 2D. So make 2D charts and there is no loss of information. What about these other charts like a radar chart or surface charts and candlestick charts and all of them? Well, some of them have a place in certain business communications. For example, the candlestick charts are things that are often used in stock market, trading markets, and people in that particular industry, they know how to read those charts. So nobody wastes their time trying to understand them. But for a normal day-to-day business situations like everyday stuff, you don't really want to waste your time and your audience's time building these kind of charts. What about bubble charts? They seem to be a variation of XY scatter plots. Bubble charts are pretty decent, but they suffer from some of the limitations that we humans have. Let me show you. Let's say, I don't know how many of you have created bubble charts before, but it basically takes 3 values. So let's say region and month, sales. So we have 3 regions and we have 3 month sales data, and we wanted to create a bubble chart. And some numbers like. Make sure you have some data and the combinations should be there. The column should be numeric, only then the bubble chart would work. So we'll create a bubble chart, and this is what Excel comes up with. This is not ideal because I guess month is plotted on y-axis, but let's try to look at it and understand what we have here. Essentially, a bubble chart will help you communicate 3 different things: the region, month, and what is the sales volume in that combination. Now, the size of the bubble is relative to the amount. So 100 is, which is our highest amount on region 1, month 1. At that combination 1 and 1, a circle of the size 100 is drawn. and the size smaller the circle, the lesser that value is. Now, the challenge here is we are very poor at measuring and comparing areas. So, if I ask you which circle is the second biggest or the first biggest, we will have really hard time figuring that out, because the numbers are all over the place. We do have numbers close to 90 and 93 and 100, and the areas for those three circles are almost similar, right? We will have to have some sort of equipment like a scale or something, measure the diameter and then calculate the areas of each surface. So, bubble charts, although they communicate this picture, they tend to confuse us, and we tend to make poor decisions based on them, because we are not able to make up which one is bigger and how big the first one is in relation to the second one, etc. So, for that reason I find bubble charts a little hard to read and use in situations. Not only that, the second thing is it has 3 dimensions, right? The region, the month and the sales amount. So, it kind of multiplies the amount of complexity that we have. Okay. Let me very quickly talk about the colors that you should be using when you create the chart. We spoke about fonts as well. When it comes to colors, if you already have 2010 or 13, just stick to the default color palette that you have in Excel. The default theme colors, which are office theme colors, are pretty good and really well contrasted. So, use them all the time. Don't go and investigate and try to come up with some new colors, because you don't want your audience to wonder about, I wonder what color that is. You know, that's the least of their concerns. You want them to wonder about the numbers and the data that you are communicating. So, use the default colors, because they will put the attention on the data. When it comes to fonts, again just stick to the default fonts like Calibri or Sego, and then use them, because people have been seeing those default fonts all the time. So, anything you write in that default font, the attention goes into the message. But if you choose some funky or different font, then people will spend time trying to think about the font face and why that particular one is used, etc. Use only one font face per chart. So, everything in that chart should be in that font face, maybe different sizes to emphasize the title and de-emphasize the other elements. Any questions or any comments? Yes, please.
So most of the examples are using a white background. Is that the preference or the best practice? Because I've seen charts that are sometimes nice on a dark background, but then there's so much things to have to deal with.
That's right. I think these are optimized for white background kind of situation, because usually we can contrast better on a plain white background. The same holds good for full black as well, but then you would have to completely flip all the things, and that could mean extra work for you and your audience, and it may not work on some mediums like printout. So, you do all the hard work, make a nice chart with a dark background, but when it is printed, maybe they didn't use a color printer, or even on a color printer that amount of contrast cannot be bought as in a projector screen or something. So, that's a challenge. Okay, then I will save this workbook and make sure that all the people who signed up for this class, you will get a copy of this. Thank you so much, and for more resources you can visit chandoo.org, where we have lots of charting examples, guidelines and principles. Thank you.